Hello everyone and welcome to this screening and panellist discussion of CEASEFIRE, A Generation, a docu-series produced by LUMI at the Queen's Film Theatre in Belfast and funded by the Community Relations Council. My name's Thomas Copeland, I'm the Head of News at Queen's Radio, and it's a real pleasure to be with you here this afternoon. This is a really important series. It explores some of the attitudes, the reflections, passions and ambitions of the post-Good Friday Agreement generation of young people. And it seems right, doesn't it, that in the 100th anniversary of partition, young people stop and ask, where are we? Where are we going? And what is it that we want this place, Northern Ireland, to feel like in the years to come? Today, we're going to be screening some of the films that make up this series, each of which covers a unique and really important part of life in Northern Ireland for young people, from mental health to the troubles, cultural identity, to growing up LGBTQ+. In the call with me, I have some of the stars of the CEASEFIRE Generation docu-series. They're here to watch along with us, and then they're going to give us a bit more of an insight into their thoughts and their feelings on the many important topics that we cover today. I'm going to let them all introduce themselves to you. So first up in the call, we have Robbie West. Hi, Robbie.
Hey, what's up?
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Robbie.
Okay, I'm Robbie. I'm currently studying counselling. I'm 24 years old. I like tea, I guess. There's not really a massive amount to say.
A fantastic start. Thank you, Robbie. And next up, we have Megan McElwain. Hiya, Megan.
Hi.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Megan.
Well, I'm 18 and I'm studying at Belfast Met. I'm doing my A-levels and I'm hoping to pursue writing and directing in the future.
Fantastic, Megan. Thank you so much. Next up, Finn Devlin. Hiya, Finn.
Hello.
Hi, Finn. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Finn. I'm 22 years old and I'm studying photography and video directing at Ulster University.
Fantastic. A real creative bunch we've got with us here today. And finally, Jack Graham. Hiya, Jack.
Hi, how's it going? I'm Jack, I'm 24 and I'm from Belfast. I'm a trans activist and I currently work as a support worker for mental health and learning disabilities, and I'm planning on going to London in September here to study social work.
Fantastic. Thank you, all of you, for being with us here today. Together, we're going to watch each of these films in turn, then stop, have a bit of a chat about what we've seen, what it says about young people, what it says about Northern Ireland, and what it says about the future of this place. So let's just crack on. Why don't we? Let's watch the first film. It's around 5 minutes long, and it's all about cultural identity. Let's watch it now.
Another question that I have is kind of like around identity, because I think like Northern Ireland is a very complex place where people identify as Irish or British. Where do you sit with that and why?
If I had to choose between the two, I would always identify as Irish over British, simply because that's just been my upbringing. I don't personally see a difference between Northern Ireland and the Republic in terms of identity of being Irish. But I also, which is something that my friends don't necessarily agree with, I would identify as Northern Irish more so. That's like my first identity, because that's not something that's really considered, because in the Good Friday Agreement it says you can be Irish or British or both, but there's no really accommodation for what if I don't feel like either of them.
I love when this comes up. I would go for Northern Irish personally.
I would identify myself as Irish and a Catholic. I'm just Northern Irish, like here, yeah.
I don't personally feel British because I'm not connected to the British Isles. They have an experience with Brexit and politics that I just have no relation to in a way. And then the Republic has made such leaps and bounds with their own politics, and they just have their own separate issues going on that I feel like we don't relate to.
Because there's like the Protestants and the Catholics over here, like everyone knows that. But I would say, like, I would relate more, me coming from a Protestant background, I would relate more to a Catholic than I would an English person.
And why do you think that is?
Because we've all seen the same stuff.
I was raised as a prod. That was just my whole family in general, like my mother's side, my father's side. I didn't really know much else. I didn't understand.
I was raised in an Irish-speaking house and I went to an Irish-speaking primary school. So It's just always been a part of me.
In Northern Ireland, I feel like our present is so defined by the Troubles that it's difficult to kind of pinpoint other aspects of our culture, if that makes sense.
I've started to feel over the years as though Northern Ireland is its own little bubble, and Northern Irish is an identity that can kind of surpass any political or religious belief, because it's all, I always describe it as, we're all in this mess together, and it's all just we're gonna acknowledge it and just keep trucking on. That's like the way I consider being Northern Irish. Like, it's nothing to do with politics or anything like that. And it took me a long time to accept that, because I was like, Northern Irish is an acceptance of my non-Irish identity, but I don't think that's the case. I think it's just a case of being both. I'm Irish overall, but more specifically, I'm Northern Irish, and there's nothing to be like ashamed of for that.
Like, you see a lot of things now where like a lot of British Asians are like trying to do the whole thing of like merging the two like cultures together, and like tying in parts of like their Britishness that they like with parts of like their other heritage that they like their Asian heritage. And then it's just kind of like, well, you just kind of find that what they're doing is just taking parts of each thing that they like, and they're just creating a new identity for themselves. And I think that's what a lot of people around like the West are doing when they're from like they're culturally from somewhere else. They just find parts of each culture that they like, and they like take those and then roll with them, which I think is quite a nice place to be. Like, it's quite a nice thing to be able to do.
Yeah.
If I say I'm black, they're like, but are you black Irish black, or are you black? I'm like, what is that? I'm just black, simple. And you just, like before, just repetitive, just saying it back and forth to them.
Being the only like brown person in classes and stuff, I think you do feel like, oh, I don't really belong to this, and like noticing differences in your culture and other people's culture, you're like, oh, I don't really belong here. But I don't know, like I feel like once you make good friends, and I think because as well of my family's here, I've never felt like I'm out of place. Like I can call Northern Ireland my home, because everyone I love, I'm like, know is here, do you know? So it's not, I feel like everyone maybe feels sometimes where they don't feel like they're part of a community, but if you have people that you can call your friends, then I think that's all that matters.
And get back to our panel. Now, there's so much to talk about in there, folks. Robbie, you're the only one of us here today who was featuring in that particular film. So I want to start with you. And you said in there, didn't you, I love it when this comes up, so I'm sure you'd love it if I ask you a few more questions about where your head's at. You said in there that you feel Northern Irish. What does that identity mean to you, and how is it different from another identity that you might feel?
Well, for me, it's more, I would see myself as Northern Irish because I was born in Northern Ireland. And mainly because from a young age, you're pushed into like either one side or the other, like either growing up with an Irish background or growing up with a Protestant background. And for me, trying to be Northern Irish, trying to pick that one where you're from, it's trying to either keep some sort of neutral ground between it, where you don't want to take sides, you just want to like embrace where you're from and not necessarily the cultural differences around that.
Because traditionally, of course, Robbie, you know, you talked about being from a Protestant community. Protestant communities perhaps may have felt more British than Northern Irish. Is that something that you have maybe wrestled with? Do you think that's changing?
I'm not exactly sure.
And I suppose that's something, isn't it, that each person comes to and figures out for themselves. Jack, you're with us here as well. You weren't in that particular film, but would you describe yourself as Northern Irish? What do you think Northern Irish as an identity means to you?
Yeah, you know, if I was to go anywhere, say it was, you know, across the water or whatever, if someone was to ask me where I was from, I would say that I'm Northern Irish. I wouldn't really say that I'm British, although I was brought up in sort of a Protestant community. I don't really have any sort of religious or sort of background as well, which kind of fits in with being a Protestant itself. And I would probably just identify as Northern Irish, or just to make it easier, just say Irish because I guess we're in the island of Ireland. So either or is good for me. I don't really care that much.
So it's interesting that you say that you don't care that much. Is that something that you think that maybe your generation, this generation, spends less time thinking about?
I think it really depends on sort of your background, and I guess as well how people are brought up. We talk about Northern Ireland having like the highest rate of like PTSD, and I think some trauma can be passed on to the younger generation. So I think it really depends on where you're from.
Okay, absolutely. And we'll be talking a little bit more later on about mental health and PTSD, so we'll have to get your thoughts there as well. Megan, I saw you nodding along there as well. How would you sort of describe your identity, and how do you think maybe that's different from generations that have come before?
I feel like our generation don't take it as seriously as what other generations have. To be honest, I think when it comes down to it, it's convenience. It depends on where you are, what area you're in, who you're talking to. I change my identity depending on who it is. It's sort of like Jack was saying, it's like more convenient to just say, oh, I'm Irish, because it's better than having to explain to them like what it means to be Northern Irish. But I wouldn't, and I've never really identified as British. I feel like I don't know many people that even would say that they're British. I think for a lot of younger people, it's like you're Northern Irish or you're Irish, and I don't know. That's probably an entirely separate discussion altogether on why people, are not as comfortable with identifying as British. But
yeah. I suppose there are a great number of people that maybe do feel that way, and maybe they're just not reflected in this call. But I think, isn't it, Megan, important? The thing that jumps out from what you're saying there is that you feel quite comfortable to kind of change around, and you don't feel necessarily tied down to a certain identity that defines who you are.
Yeah, I wouldn't feel offended, if someone said, "Oh, this is Megan and she's Irish." Like, it wouldn't bother me in the slightest.
Yeah.
Whereas I know people from older generation, you say they're Irish and they jump down your throat. Like, no, I'm not Irish. What are you on about? It's funny. It's generational differences.
And Finn, what's your thoughts on that? Would you describe yourself as Northern Irish or something else entirely?
So I've always sort of described myself as Irish, but like I would be very in touch with like my heritage, and like we have our family crests like in our house, just like our terms and everything. But that is not to take away from anybody else who wants to identify as anything like as another nationality. If that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. I would never take that away from anyone. Just because I identify myself as being Irish doesn't mean that I don't think that people from Northern Ireland can say that they're either Northern Irish or British, because they have absolutely every right to. Like in this country, it's like that identity has created such a divide in the past that I don't feel like it should be as important as it is. It's for me, it's just my identity to be Irish, but that doesn't mean that someone else can't be British, Northern Irish just because they're born here.
Yeah, I was really struck by something Shauna said in there, and I'd love to get some of your thoughts on it. The first thing she said was that Northern Irish was an identity that was shaped by common experiences. Her lines were, "We're all in this mess together." And that kind of ties in, doesn't it, with what Sophie said in there as well about relating more to other people in Northern Ireland than those from, perhaps the rest of the UK or indeed the rest of Ireland. Robbie, when you think of the idea of Northern Irish, is it common experiences? Because you alluded to that earlier on, didn't you? Is that what you think the Northern Irish identity is maybe all about?
In a way, yeah. All of us, we all have different backgrounds, but we all have like the same common goal or common experience that we've all came through it together, just on a different perspective. Yeah, absolutely. And Megan, something that struck me as well that Shauna said, and you said that you would sort of think of yourself as somewhere between Northern Irish and Irish, and that would be
generally where you put yourself. She talked about how identifying as Northern Irish at one time to her seemed a bit like an acceptance of a non-Irish identity. Somehow it was threatening her Irishness to identify as Northern Irishness. And I'm sure some people would say the same of it being an acceptance of a non-British identity. I mean, it strikes me that you don't seem to have a problem at all about being both things, and those two don't eat it away, or they don't sort of they're not mutually exclusive.
Well, for me, I come from a Protestant community and sort of like loyalist basis around me. But it was never something that I sort of could connect to. And you know, sort of the tradition with areas like mine then is that you'd be British. But I never related to Britishness. I never got it. I never wanted to be British. It was just something that like it just didn't, like people said in the video, it's not, I can't relate to it. I can't, you know, we have a really unique experience here. Like each of us have really unique sort of standpoints and unique trauma that I feel like other people don't understand if they're not from here. For me, saying that I was, you know, being comfortable with being Irish is sort of just like a development of my political beliefs and my sort of my education of Northern Ireland and learning about Northern Ireland, and I became more comfortable with you know, someone referring to me as Irish. It was never really you know, I wasn't like raised to say, oh, I'm Irish, you're Irish, you're from Ireland. It was the opposite. So I don't know, it's complicated, I guess.
I think that's the only conclusion we've come to, everyone, is that it's complicated. The last thing I want to ask, Medea said there at the end that maybe, you know, picking an identity these days was a bit like, you know, cherry picking is the wrong word, but picking little bits of different identities that you like and then formulating them together to make something that is unique to you. I'm interested to go around each of you and just say, you know, if Northern Irish is an identity, could you pick out one little thing that it means to you? Maybe that's a really difficult question for everyone. Finn, I'm going to have to start with you. If Northern Irish means something to you, can you pick out one little bit? It can be silly, it can be serious. You know, what's unique about this place and the identity of this place?
Well, for me, like being Northern Irish is just like, if I'm gonna describe myself as Northern Irish, I want to be like I'm inclusive of other people. You know, for me, I've grown up with a lot of friends who are from Protestant backgrounds or other things. Like one of my best friends, his dad's a minister, and like we hang out all the time. I've never had a problem with that at all. Like I like he's had friends that have had problems with him being friends with me, because I'm Irish. But you know, for me, Northern Irish is just being inclusive with like who you're friends with. You know, I don't want to keep the hate going in a way.
Okay, Jack, why don't we finish up with you in this section? If you had to pick out something unique that stands out for you as to what Northern Irish means, you know, if anything, what would it mean to you?
I feel like Northern Ireland just holds like so much history, and I think in that way we're really unique, like Megan has said, compared to, you know, other countries. And I kind of feel, although there's been a lot of conflict, I still feel like we have a very close community, whether it's Catholic or Protestant. I feel like as generations go on, we start to come closer and closer together, to kind of unite as one, as such in a way. So that's what I think is unique about being in Northern Ireland, that you do feel close to people and you do kind of understand other people, even if you have different backgrounds.
I think that's what we're taking away from this, everyone, isn't it? That there's some element of common and shared experiences that makes Northern Ireland unique. Okay, we could talk about this all day. Let's move on to the next little film in the docu-series. This film is all about the Troubles. It's about 8 minutes long. Let's see if we can watch it now.
For the likes of the Troubles, it was just was my childhood, learning about it and knowing about it, knowing all the ins and outs of it, knowing all the things that, you know, maybe like these people at BBC who make big documentaries about it don't know.
My mum and dad wouldn't really talk about the Troubles a lot because they don't want me to kind of have like full experiences. So it's just really what I've learned myself in school or outside of school.
Because it was just second nature to me, and I just knew about it always. It was never like this mad like thing that I just found about, and it was a big shock. It was just part of my life.
They might not want me to know just because they might want me to worry about how they're feeling as well about it. I imagine both my parents have probably dealt with a lot with the troubles, and they don't really like regaling in everything that's happened.
Because I went to a really middle class secondary school. Everyone was very either sheltered or completely unaware. Like, there were people that just did not know. It was almost frustrating at the start, because it was like I understood how bad they were, and I understood all the pain and the trauma, and these people just didn't. And it was like, how do you not know? Some of it, I think, is ignorance. Some people don't want to know. And there are other people who were sheltered either because their parents were traumatised or their parents just weren't part of it.
I think it's going to always be difficult, especially in the north, when it comes to, you know, whether you want to say Protestant, Catholic, Unionist, Republican, Nationalist, whatever, green and orange. It's always going to be difficult for them to find a middle ground, because there's so much difference, there's so much history there as well. So it really is just understanding and trying your very best instead of throwing your toys out of the trolley like they did a few years ago.
I always take it back to South Africa, the black and white. Over here it's a Protestant and Catholic. It's just indifference. It's just different perspectives.
I don't take sides. I'm not a Protestant. I'm not a Catholic. Like, I don't even believe in God, anything like that. So I've just kind of tried to sit in the middle, in the centre, and have my own view and my own opinion of what happened. And because I've heard both sides, I think I have a clearer view. Like anyone who's heard from both sides, you do get a clearer view of actually what was going on.
I would identify myself as Irish and a Catholic, and there's places, you know, like the village and Sandy Road, places like that, where you would be fearful of going on your own. But that is more just, you know, again, stigma. You're made to feel that you can't go there. And it's probably the same for Protestants, Unionists. You know, feel like if they walk up the Falls Road, they're going to get shot, and that's not the case. You know, people don't actually know, but it's more the fear that you build up in your own head.
As much as I wouldn't like it to exist, it's always going to exist. That's there's always going to be something. I mean, that keeps it going.
I think people like hanging on to certain old viewpoints because it makes them feel safe.
And it's all just fear. It was all just fear. It was all just being scared. So, you know, this bad thing happened because we were scared. And then the loyalist side will tell you, this bad thing happened because we were scared. Like, everything came out of fear. I think that's just something that you have to know as well. Just know that every bad thing stemmed from fear, from someone was scared.
I think that if we look forward to maybe 20, 25 years in the future, things will be so much different. But when you're living here, everything feels so much slower.
Because I'm in a predominantly Protestant area, I was in a boxing club around my area, and the three years ago I made the decision to move boxing clubs, but I didn't know where I was gonna go. And once I seen where I wanted to move to, it was in a predominantly Catholic area, and I was hesitant and scared to move in that area in case of any backlash I'd get back
From people in your area?
From people in my area. Then I was like, I sat back and just thought, listen, you're in this community, but you're not part of this community in that way. You're neutral grounds. And I took that leap of faith. I joined the boxing club, and in the Catholic area, Holy Trinity Boxing Club, amazing boxing club. Shout out Holy Trinity. And no backlash happened, which shows the progress that's happened within my area.
Most of the friends I would have at the minute come from a Protestant background, but they're all pretty open-minded. They don't seem to mind anyone. They'll absorb anyone in their friend group.
People my age, I'm friends with people on both sides of the community, and none of them care. Like, they genuinely don't. And even if their dads were involved, they formed their own opinion on it. like I have, like I form my own opinion on things. It's different from what my family are saying, but I think it is a lot to do with the older generation.
My granddad's PTSD, and he was just, I grew up with, like, he's very abrasive. Like, we love him. He's amazing. He's such a man. But, you know, he has these things, like if you drop your keys, he's like mumbling under his breath. That's his thing, mumbling under his breath. And you're like, what are you getting on like that for? And he just turns around again. And it clicks on later on when you kind of figure out more stuff about the psyche, and you learn about PTSD and what that is. You're like, oh, okay, I know what's wrong with you now. And you learn about things. I learned about stuff about him that I was like, okay, so he's traumatized. This is why he does these things.
From my experience, people our age don't care about sectarianism or religion. They really couldn't care less. So we start to worry about things bigger than that.
I would go away and look at stuff if I'm not, if I hear about a situation or a certain event that happened in the past that I don't know particularly much on, I will go and I will educate myself on it.
If you grew up in the Troubles, I think it's slightly harder for them to move on. I think in certain communities as well, depending on what community you're part of, it's difficult to move on. It's difficult. I think people think by moving on you're forgetting, but you're not. You're not forgetting. It's very much still there. You can't just rid yourself of trauma. It stays with you for the rest of your life. But move forward slightly, please. We're begging you to just push a little, and then everything will be fine.
Okay, let's bring back to the panel. There's so much in there to have a chat about. Where to begin? Megan, Robbie, and Finn, you were all featured in there. Megan and Finn, I suppose at the very start there, something you said struck me. Megan, on one hand, you said that learning about the Troubles and knowing about the Troubles was almost second nature to you. Whereas Finn, you talked about how your parents, didn't want to talk about it, and maybe it was something that you had discovered, by yourself. Megan, why do you think that, and how do you think young people learn about the Troubles in different ways? I mean, why's your experience sounds a little bit different to Finn's?
I feel like it's all to do with, I think everything starts with the trauma. I think it's a sort of trauma response. Some will sort of recognize their trauma and will be really upfront with it as a way to cope. And I think for my family, they didn't want me to be shocked by anything. So, they left everything out and, laid all the cards on the table and said, this is what happened. And, it was horrendous, but things are better now. Not perfect, but
yeah. And I want to talk about that issue of trauma as well, Megan. Finn, I mean, how does that compare to your experience growing up, what you've just heard from Megan?
So my mum and dad waited till I was a bit older to tell me a lot about the Troubles and stuff. So like it wasn't that they didn't tell me ever. It was just one of those things that waited till I was a little bit older, had a little bit of my own sort of view around the whole thing in Northern Ireland, and then they would like open up and tell me a bit more. Like my dad's earliest memory was being thrown into the back of a car because there was bombs going off. And my granny even used to own a shop here in Dungannon, and had the windows blown out of it multiple times because of bombs. It's one of those things. It's just like I didn't learn a lot about my parents' experiences with the Troubles until I was a bit older, and they tended to stay away from it. My mum and dad were both punks, so they just wanted to do their own thing, get to be their own people, and not get bogged down by the semantics of like the Troubles and the height of the Troubles, really.
That's interesting. And Robbie and Jack, how did you learn about the history of this place, learn about the Troubles, the years before you were on the scene? I mean, and what's the right way, I suppose, embedded in that question, what's the right way for young people to learn about the Troubles? Jack, why don't we start with you? How did you learn about it, and what's the right way to learn about it?
I actually didn't really learn much about the Troubles up until probably last year, mainly because my parents never have really spoke about it before. Like they've only really told certain stories. And I kind of wanted to make up my own opinion about the Troubles. So I kind of researched into it and watched documentaries and kind of got both sides of the story. learning about like Irish Republicans' views on it, and then just like also the British and people who identify as Northern Irish, that sort of side of things. So I kind of made up my own thoughts about it all, rather than taking what other people have said or what people from my family have said about it.
Yeah, Robbie, what about you? I mean, how did you learn about it, and how do you think people should learn about it?
I learned bits and pieces about it through school. I went to a Protestant school, and they took part in this peace program. So there was my school and two others, and it was about mixing the three together, and just taking part in various activities, going around parts of Belfast just to like get a bit of a general understanding about it. It was never anything too specific about what fully went on. It was just kind of like cover the basics and break down barriers to build up new friendships and break stigmas.
Let's introduce, folks, a new format to this discussion. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand in just a second. All right, this is exciting stuff. Put your hand in the air if you don't mind, if you think that you got a good education about the Troubles in school. Okay, hands up if you think that the Troubles should be taught in school. That's interesting. Robbie, why didn't you raise your hand there? I wonder, I mean, do you think that it's better coming from parents and a community, or is it something that should be more embedded in our education process here?
I'm not really sure. It's not that I'm against it being taught in schools, or I'm against parents talking about their experiences. I know that parents could have a bit of a bias towards it whenever they're going to explain it, and then that could also affect the decision their child makes in the process. And then it's also the same with schools. Whenever I kind of came through it with school, it was more about the Protestant side of it. There wasn't, we never really touched massively on like the other side. And I mean, I'm 24 now. I'm still finding out bits and pieces. I only found out about confirmation a few years ago. I never even knew that was a thing. So it's more, I feel it could be taught somewhere, but it would need to be like a completely neutral place where you can get facts in from both sides instead of it being a bias towards one.
Finn, what's your take on that? Do you think we need to do better in our education system?
Yeah, I agree with Robbie wholeheartedly, and like I feel like it should be a real neutral, like decided kind of curriculum for teaching, how the Troubles affected Northern Ireland. A well-educated public is, the best way to get, people in power even as well. Like that affects voting and everything. If you everyone who's educated on both sides, then that affects like how our government works, because they're going to vote in people who have interests at heart of the public, instead of, oh, I'm voting for these people because my parents vote for these people, or because my family members vote for these people.
Interesting. And Megan, let's push on slightly. You chatted in there about class. You said you went to a middle class school. You maybe felt that your peers at school didn't seem to share your experiences. Tell us a little bit about that, and maybe did that tell you something, teach you anything about how class played a role in the Troubles?
Yeah, well, I'm from a very working class background, sort of almost criminal class. Whenever I went to grammar school, it was a shock to the system, because it was like these people don't know sort of the half of it. For me, it just told me that there were some people that were just genuinely not involved. They felt the shockwaves of it, but they never had the direct intimidation or violence. They heard the stories. The roads were closed, the shops were closed. That sort of thing. They felt it in that regard, but they didn't get that direct, like I said, intimidation or violence thrown at them. It's really sort of difficult to talk about class in regards to this stuff, because I don't know, I I could stumble over words, but
no, it's and listen, a great many number of people have spent a lot of time thinking, and no quite conclusions come to. It's all about individual perspectives, isn't it, and experiences. You talked as well, Megan, in that section about feeling impartial about the Troubles because you'd heard from both sides, and I think that reflects something that Robbie said, and I think actually Finn and Jack may be there as well. Do you think that something new for young people in this place today is that they generally do feel a bit more impartial, or do you think that you kind of made special efforts to try to hear from perspectives and hear from voices that didn't align with those maybe that you would have heard at home in your own community?
I feel like a lot of young people mix really well. Apart from the odd rocket with an archaic mindset, but I feel like you don't even really need to have all the information to mix. You don't need to sit there with your history book and go through both sides of the Troubles. I feel like that's something that's really Northern Irish though. Like you can have a pint with someone and not talk about your history. I feel like it's quite easy for young people to mix because we're ready to move on and we are moving on. I feel like that's what it's about.
And in the film, of course, Robbie, you said something similar, didn't you, about how your friendship groups are very open to considering new things. How do you think that your group of friends and the people that you socialize with shapes your perspectives on the Troubles as compared to maybe your parents?
What was the question again? Sorry, because I just caught the last part of it.
No. I just commented on the fact that you said that you had a very open friendship group that talked to lots of different people. How do you think that shaped you?
I wouldn't say the friend group is what shaped me. I'd already been shaped into fitting in with them long before that. I'd came through the care system, so I've lived with like a lot of different young people over like a span of 10 years, and it's after a while you do start to like meet other people who have a different sense of culture, who do have a different identity. One of my foster carers was Italian, so I ended up growing up with quite a background in that layer. And then obviously if you're not rebelling against it, then you become open to it, and then that's how I've built up the open-mindedness and went from there, really.
Absolutely. And Finn and Jack, I'm going to direct this last question at Megan, because you two are center stage in our next film. Megan, you talked in there, didn't you, about PTSD, and I'd encourage folks to read a lot more into this because it's so prevalent in Northern Ireland, even on a global scale. Northern Ireland really stands out as a hotspot. Tell us a bit more about your understanding of PTSD and how it affects people in Northern Ireland. Oh, I'm not sure if Megan. Can you hear me, Megan?
Sorry, my things are cutting out.
No, don't worry. Maybe it's a problem at my end. I don't know. I was just saying, Megan, tell us a little bit more about your understanding of PTSD and how it affects people in Northern Ireland.
Well, PTSD was something that I was familiar with sort of growing up. Sort of, not knowing the term for it, but you grow up with someone who has PTSD, you know what it is, you know the signs. It's sort of just a horrible plague on the brain. It really it affects everyday living, and it affects everyone around you. When someone gets diagnosed with PTSD, it's something that the entire sort of family or their close community has to deal with as well. Well, my grand is the one that has PTSD, and he is wonderful coping with it now. But there's definitely things that are very prevalent in my childhood that I would remember that sort of traumatized me as in turn. Sort of like that generational trauma. It's a really horrific thing to think about, sort of PTSD and how much of a horrendous effect it leaves. Because my granddad was in the army, And that's something that I think in Northern Ireland you tend to sort of hold close to your chest. You know, you don't tell people because it is a very touchy subject. But for him, his trauma came from having to, you know, literally scrape bodies off the ground, and, you know, being in the complete pitch black and having bullets flying past his head, you know, terrifying stuff. I don't know, it was something that I grew up really familiar with, and like you said before, looking into it is really important, because so many people in Northern Ireland are suffering from it.
Okay, yeah, and I'd really encourage people to look more into it, and thank you for sharing that, Megan. Let's move on to our next film. This film's about 8 minutes long, and it's all about growing up LGBTQ+. Let's see if we can watch it now.
I think a lot of people, you know, are homophobic or transphobic. You know, obviously legal marriage has only been legal since about 3 months ago or something like that. So yeah, that's probably one of the things that kind of drags me away from being here, because for a while I kind of felt like it was hard to be myself. Being scared of what people would say about me and like judge me. Because like I'm a trans man, so coming out when I was like 14 years old was really hard for me, especially with school. And at the time it was 2014, so it wasn't really known of. I didn't know anybody else who felt the way I did, so it kind of felt like I was a bit abnormal to other people.
Northern Ireland has a lot of a way to go still. Even in the past couple of months, whenever I've went home back to Dungannon to go for a night out, went out for a friend's 21st in a quite local bar, and even then I was experiencing some quite heavy homophobia, just for the way I dress. And this person, not knowing who I was, just came right up to me, squared up to me into my face, and just said, "Are you some kind of fucking faggot?" And I was just extremely angry, because this is someone I've never met, never known, has no correlation with me whatsoever, just came right up into my face.
And then as I started to get older, I think I actually watched, you know, like a YouTube video or something like that where someone who I was like following for a while, for a couple of years, had said, I never even knew that they were trans. And I was just like, oh my God, that like just pinpoints how I feel. Yeah. So from that, I just kind of knew, and I waited for a while because I was scared to tell people, you know. I didn't want my family to not accept me, and I didn't know anybody else who felt that way. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to go to. I didn't know who to talk to. So yeah, it was really hard.
In secondary school, I was about 14 whenever I come out as bisexual as well, and so I'd received a lot of ridicule for that, and then always having my kind of independent status as well, and having no religion, like no formal religion, I guess, was an interesting one, being in a small town and being in only Catholic schools as well. So it was just kind of these two big factors that people didn't really understand or like.
I actually went to an all-girls school, so that was another big kick in the ass, really, because all the teachers just didn't care. And it was weird because obviously I went and I spoke to one of the teachers about it, I think, and then just from then you could obviously tell that they went and told everyone, like, you know, so, and they were so unsupportive, it was unbelievable. Like, I've actually kind of wanted to just go in and actually sit down and talk to them and be like, you know, you actually made me feel this way. I told my mum that I was gay because I cut all my hair really short, so I ended up saying to her that I was gay, but like obviously that's not really, I was really upset when I was telling her, and she was like, oh, it's fine, it's just like a phase, and you know, all the usual kind of stuff people say. And then the next day I texted her and I said, that's not what I wanted to tell you. And then she was like, well, what is it then? And I was like, can you not guess? And then she just said, like, you want to be a boy. And I was just like, I don't want to be a boy. Like, I am. It's just who I am. It's how I feel. And then I got home and she just looked really disappointed, to be fair, like when I came home. So yeah, it was really difficult from there onwards.
Northern Ireland still has a lot of a way to go in changing small town views, rather than the likes of Belfast, which I feel like has been quite progressive and open in terms of people changing their mindsets as well.
And then we also went through family therapy as well. So it was really difficult to go through family therapy because when you're... It's just basically like a setup of just like you in a room, and then there's a glass window, and then someone sits on the other side of the glass and listens to the whole conversation. There's two like counselors in the room, and then you sit with your family in like a chair, and they like sit and tell you how they feel about you. So when you're hearing that 24/7, and then when you're going into school and you're getting bullied for how you look, and then going and sitting in a family therapy session, it's not really ideal, to be honest. But just talked about how they felt and tried to get their perspective of, you know, I kind of accepted that, you know, they're obviously going through like a grieving process. You know, they're kind of basically losing someone that they once had in some sort of way. And I get that, but at the time it was pretty depressing stuff, yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of lack of education for people who are necessarily older than me, people who are maybe 25 to 32, and they have generational influence of like gay people are bad or whatever from their grandparents to their parents, and those are the people that need the kind of information rather than the younger generation who have more access to the information with the advantation of the technology age, where it's, you know, slightly older people who would need the kind of information for them to be able to progress, I guess.
It was a difficult process, but definitely so much happier with where I'm at now. You know, I have all my family's support. I think they never even, my mum never even knew what being trans was, you know, so I kind of understood that, but it took, I would say, about 4 or 5 years to actually really wrap their head around it. I think once I started medically transitioning and started with the deep voice and the beard and stuff like that, that's when they were really kind of socially accepting me, and I don't know if that's really a good thing.
I feel like if Northern Ireland still progresses at a rate that it is now, the future could be quite bright in terms of people. I feel like my generation, from what I've talked to other people about, has been really, really accepting, and that makes me really happy.
So many things to talk about in there. Jack and Finn, obviously the two of you taking center stage in that film. You both talked about coming out, and you both said the age of 14, I think, as it happens. I wanted to just get a little bit more of your thoughts. You know, at that age, school is already such a kind of tumultuous, emotional, foundational time in your life. How did then adding on to that, this unique journey of discovering, you know, who you are and how you feel, add to the difficulty of those experiences? Jack, I suppose we could maybe start with you. How difficult was that period of time in your life looking back now?
It was really a whirlwind for me, really, to be honest with you, trying to figure out your own gender identity, or really more so knowing, having a sense of your gender identity at the age of 14, and really knowing who you are and how to actually project yourself to people and actually get people to take you seriously in some sort of way, was really hard. And I think, obviously, like I've said, going to an all-girls school was quite traumatic, to say the least. You know, in some parts of ways of me, I feel as if I would have hated to go to a mixed school, because once I did have the people in my life that I needed, maybe around fifth year when people actually finally started to stop bullying me, and I did have people and I had friends around me who cared, it became a lot easier. And I feel like there would have been a lot of toxic masculinity if I went to maybe a mixed school, because I've had to deal with that as well. A lot of toxic masculinity, and even nowadays, if people were to know that I'm trans and as a male, and they would maybe try and demasculize me because they feel demasculated by me because of the way I look and how masculine I look, if that makes sense. So
interesting. That's a really interesting perspective, Jack. And let me ask you this as well. There's been lots of chats, and I'm sure it will be discussed elsewhere in this conference, and it regularly is amongst young people, about sexual education in Northern Ireland and how it operates and works in our schools. How did you think about the process of sex ed that you were taught while at school? Did you think it was adequate?
No, definitely not. Like, coming to actually think about sex ed, when I was in school, it was very much heterosexual relationships as well, and it never really spoke about gay relationships, lesbian relationships, or whether someone's trans and in a relationship, and the safety boundaries for that as well. Obviously they did talk about certain things like HIV and stuff like that you can catch if you're in like a gay relationship or whatever sort of relationship, that you could potentially catch something like that. But it's pretty much heterosexual relationships, really, and it never really spoke about the difference between gender and sexual orientation either.
Mm-hmm.
That was another thing.
Did you feel alienated by the kind of sex education that you got in school?
Yeah, I just kind of felt like it never really applied to me as like a trans male who is, straight. I never felt like it was, it never applied to me. Everything that was said was just, for cis straight women, basically.
Okay. Finn, I suppose there are two questions that we discussed there with Jack. One, give us a bit more of an insight as to that process of discovery at such an age when already you're going through, a lot in school. And then I wonder also your thoughts on that issue of how adequate sex education was for young people like you, or just young people in general here in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, so my coming out story isn't really like massively interesting. It was just a case of like I was telling a couple of my friends that I was bisexual, and then that kind of just became a rumor, and then that was just like I got asked that all the time, and then I got bullied for a bit as well. And that's part of the reason why I'm not friends with anyone from my secondary school now, is because a lot of people just didn't get it. They didn't get, my identity, and all that. So I just kind of left it all behind me as soon as I left town, basically. And as for education, education, Northern Ireland as a whole is very like sexually regressive. Not even like outside of like LGBT space. Like it's very of a like a hush hush kind of society where we don't want to talk about sex. We don't want to talk about gender identity. We don't want to talk about the LGBT community as much. And it's really unfortunate. Like it really needs to be one of those things where it's taught, because then we don't get the likes of people, that I told about in that story, who will, just randomly go up to people and start hurling abuse at them.
And how common, and I'll ask the same with Jack in a second, Finn, how common is the kind of really quite aggressive homophobia that you described in that film? How common is that in your life?
Not so much now that I'm living in Belfast, but certainly see anytime I come back home, I dress very flamboyantly. Like today I don't really look it, but usually I go all out. And I get stares, I get comments, I get shouted at, I get everything. Anytime I'm in a small town, I always get abuse hurled at me.
And Jack, how often, if you were to, just, I suppose, try to quantify it for us, in any given day, any given week, how often would you get a comment that makes you feel uncomfortable, makes you feel unwelcome, perhaps makes you feel excluded? What kind of regularity does that happen? I think, because that's really important for people to understand.
To be honest with you, a lot more now. I would get next to nothing, but that's mainly because I'm quite stealth and I don't really tell people that I'm trans. But I can, whereas when I was about 14 and right up until I was about 17, I was pretty open with me being trans, and I would have spoke a lot about it, and I would have, you know, especially my social media platforms, like a lot of people from Belfast would have known who I was. So I used to actually get people walk up to me in town and turn around to me and say, "Are you a girl or boy?" You know, that sort of thing would happen to me. And I wish that was me joking, but I literally did have people come up and say that to me, or ask me like what is in my pants, you know, like just like stuff like that. Like it's just really ridiculous things, and you know, just a lot of it comes, or like what's your birth name, you know, things like that, which is completely irrelevant, and people are obviously just asking you out of pure nosiness.
And
So
I suppose having lived here for your entire life,
yeah.
things are changing, but you know, there's a lot of people would certainly say that, you know, the pace isn't fast enough. Have you noticed a change in Northern Ireland over the last number of years in the way in which Northern Ireland deals with LGBTQ plus issues? Have you felt that, or somebody kind of, you know, on the inside, does it really feel like not a lot has changed?
Politically, no. I don't feel like they do enough, and I don't think there's enough trans healthcare as such, and I don't feel like there's enough education about trans people in school, and you know, accepting trans students and how they can make trans people feel comfortable. I feel like more so when you move out of high school into universities and colleges, there is a lot more acceptance, and you're allowed to wear whatever you want. But when it comes to school, it's like almost like you have to fit a certain image for the school image, if that makes sense. But I feel like as a community, it's definitely a lot more. Like I could literally name like well over 100 trans people that I know of now, whereas when I first came out, I did not know anybody. Like I was the only person I knew of who felt that way. So in that sense, a lot more people are more comfortable to be themselves, which is good to see. And in that way, it's progressive politically, and within schools. No,
Finn, you're a little bit older than Jack. Remind me what age you are, Finn.
I'm 22. I'm nearly 23.
no,
22.
I'm 24, so I'm.
Oh, okay. I got it the wrong way around. The reason I ask is, has Northern Ireland's approach to LGBTQ plus issues ever made you feel as if, you know, I just want to go to England, I just want to go to London, I want to leave this place? Have you ever felt that way, Finn?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whenever I'm sort of vilified by one of the largest parties in Northern Ireland that I'm not going to name, I don't really appreciate that. I don't really feel like I'm accepted here, and I feel like that's just a breeding ground to keep the hate going.
Jack?
Yeah, I would also say the same. To be honest with you, a lot more so back, like I said, a while ago, I would have been like that, and I really wanted to move to England, even though I am moving to London in September. But that's just because of educational reasons. But I think because I pass to society, then that's why. If I didn't pass as well as I do, and I didn't have facial hair, I didn't look the way I did, then it's a completely different story. You know, going through my transition, there were certain periods where I was falling in between looking pretty feminine and looking more like a bit more masculine, you know, and people not knowing whether I was maybe like a lesbian or not, you know, that sort of stage. But that's when things would have been more prevalent to like, I need to get away from here because, you know, obviously I would have had a lot of transphobia.
Yeah, I mean, like I just get abused because of the way I dress, just because I like clothes. So
I'm the same. I can't go down the street without people looking at me because I'm wearing pink trousers or like.
Exactly.
Do you know? It's yeah.
Megan and Robbie, I suppose, you know, I've been keen to let Finn and Jack there talk a lot. I don't know about your sexuality or whatever. Do you think you've noticed a change? And obviously, in the way that you think about, or people around you think about LGBTQ plus issues over the last number of years, and you know, do you think it needs to move faster, Megan?
Well, I'm a queer woman, and I like, my thinking is that I like wish I didn't have to come out. You know, I like really would have just liked to have just existed, you know, and not had to do the whole I need to tell you something, you know, because it's you don't just do it once either. You do it over and over and over again, and it's like never ending. I feel like Northern Ireland is taking, the odd step in the right direction, but seeing, issues such as conversion therapy discussed with such, it shouldn't be as much of an argument as what it is. Why to me, there's lives on the line here when it comes to situations like that. With a really bad mental health crisis as it is, discussing such things as conversion therapy, you're toying with people's lives, and it feels as though they're talking about LGBTQ plus people like we're not actually human, and that we're just bystanders, sorry, and they get to discuss our issues and have no experience within those issues. Well, most of them that stand up in Stormont do not have any idea what any LGBTQ plus person goes through on the daily basis. It's something that I feel very, passionate about, and
you mentioned mental health there, Megan. I wish we could talk about this for so much longer, folks, but I see the deadline approaching us, so I want to push on and watch the last film that we're going to watch today. It's about 6 minutes long. It's all about mental health. Let's see if we can take a look at it now.
As a 17-year-old being in Northern Ireland, what do you think is the state of this place?
Bit of a mess at the minute. I think we have a real mental health crisis here. It's awful. Being someone that is in the mental health system and is experiencing it firsthand, it is strange.
I'm passionate about the mental health academic over here. Something needs to be done and nothing's being done. It really angers me.
So, I've heard stories from every side of, everywhere in Northern Ireland, really, and I've learnt so much about our mental health crisis and the things that are happening. 6 people are committing suicide a week. It's insane. It's completely mental.
Because it's such a big problem, especially over here, in Northern Ireland, it's huge, and there's nothing being done about it. There's no help for anyone, and people are crying out for help in the health service and all these different organisations. There's no space for them, there's no funding for anything. Let's say suicide rates over here, are the highest in the UK, and suicide in males is the highest, and it's the highest over here. And I feel like males feel like they can't speak because it's the men can't cry and boys will be boys, all that stuff, and that's so not true, not at all.
It's just something that it's instilled in them that, don't show your emotions. It's not a manly thing, and that's something that my whole entire family were very eager to change, because we lost my uncle last year to suicide, and that was pretty much instilled in him as well, just growing up, you have to be the man of the family, especially because he was raising his children on his own. He wasn't allowed to be seen as failing for fear of losing his kids, and it got to the point where it was all too much for him.
It's tough. A lot of pressure. That's why I feel like we're having a high rate of suicide, because of that pressure that's placed on young males, that you can't talk freely on your emotions, you can't communicate, you can't cry even myself growing up. Dad was always like, you can't cry, men don't cry, and that's tough. So once you feel like you're gonna cry, you're gonna show a piece of emotion, you build it up, you block it, no, I can't cry. You just remember, Dad said you're gonna be weak if you cry. So I feel like that's what's building up in the young males in this society right now.
They're just not meant to be seen as weak, and it's not weak. To put it like that is ignorant, but I feel
with stuff that we've done as a family from last year after losing my uncle, we are trying to bring about that sort of idea that it's okay to open up and get help, but 9 times out of 10 the help's not there, so people see it as pointless.
I think it's quite intimidating for men to do that because there is still stigma, even though there shouldn't be. Like, personally, I know that no matter what gender you are, you suffer from mental health. But if I heard a man talking about it, my unconscious bias would still be like, what are you doing? Like, you're a man. So I think even if you don't want to feel those things, they still crop up. And in that case, is it any wonder that men don't talk about their feelings?
I think, because everyone sees the, like, it's okay not to be okay. And, like, when I was in school, 13 Reasons Why came out, and we had this big banner across the school, and it was like, it's okay to talk. But then you were going into school and wanting to talk, and there's no one to talk to. Like, they were trying to promote it, but they weren't actually giving the service that they were promoting, which is really, it's tough to watch, you know.
It's just kind of a thing where we're just like, it's hanging over our heads, and we're like, okay, what do? We are like in our 20s, where do we go from here? Like, we can't handle this on our own. But it seems like no one else is really doing anything about it either. And I think student suicide is a huge, huge issue that's just not being addressed in the way it should, because there'll be an incident and everyone will be like, we need to do better, like, we need to take control of mental health in Northern Ireland. That lasts for about a week and then it's back to normal. We just don't talk about it anymore.
I know a lot of people who are trying to get into the mental health system, trying to get help, and it's so hard. And you know, knowing the people that are part of the mental health system working in it, you know, the counsellors, the doctors, the nurses, they're really trying, but they can't do much if they don't have the money or the means or the facilities. You know, they can only do so much. So it's a sad thing to see when everyone's trying so hard and we're just not getting anything back.
The last film that we're going to watch today, and then I want to have a bit of a discussion about moving forward and where all of you and Northern Ireland go from here. But let's talk about mental health for a minute or two. Megan, you were featured in this film, and I know you have lots to say about mental health. It's an issue that you're very passionate about. You talked there as well, you know, about seeing the mental health system from the inside. I wonder if from there you could give us an idea, how bad in your mind is the mental health crisis in Northern Ireland? And it's a very difficult question to answer, but you know, why is it so bad here in Northern Ireland? Is it funding? Is it culture? Is it a mix of all those things?
I think it is a mix of all those things. I feel like when it comes down to it, no one's taking it seriously. You know, no one's taking it as seriously as they should. You can run as many schemes as you want. You know, the government will promote these schemes and these sort of charities that shouldn't even have to exist. You know, you shouldn't have to be donating money for people to have a healthy mindset. You know, it should be something that is done for us by our mental health system. You shouldn't have to be contributing to it yourself. But I feel like for me personally, the amount of times that I've been turned away by mental health professionals because, you know, you were either, you know, you weren't bad enough, you know, you're not mentally ill enough, or, you know, someone else will tell you, you're out of my, you know, you're above my pay grade, I don't know how to help you. The amount of doors you've slammed in your face because of those reasons, it would make you worse, you know. And the only progress I've ever made on my mental health has been by myself, you know, done by me for me. And I know that's the case for so many other people that are in the mental health system. They feel like they're not being helped.
Mm-hmm. Finn, what's your take? Why is the mental health crisis in Northern Ireland so bad? And I mean, what's the cause for it, do you think, in your mind?
I think it all comes down to funding. And like, say 2 months ago, I read that Stormont had back some £50 million that was for the health budget. And that money could have easily went to mental health services in Northern Ireland. Like, I'm a survivor of an abusive relationship, and for men there is nothing. There's so little in the way of helping like men deal with that. And there are charities for women, and even those are sparse. Like, they're not even as good as they should be. They should be receiving more funding. But I I went through a phase like a couple of years ago where I was very, very depressed, and I ended up in hospital, and it took me 6 months to get a mental health advisor. Like, what? How is it okay to hand back £50 million when it took me 6 months to get a mental health advisor?
Yeah, and a big issue that we talked about in that film was specific to mental health in men. And Robbie, I want to go to you on this. So actually, quite a lot of that film was dedicated to this idea, wasn't it? That men are told that they need to man up, don't cry, don't show emotion, bottle it up. And I'll come to Jack in just a second on this. But Robbie, is that a pressure that you feel, whether on your day-to-day life or more in general? And have you felt a change in that?
It's something I've basically grown up with for most of my life. I still have it for the most part. It's like I would prefer to bottle things up, mainly because there was that image spell of having to be a man, having to like not show any emotion, and then I've even had some people that I have opened up to say that they don't care, and then obviously that's added to it, and then that's just made it 10 times worse. And it's whenever you have people say that to you, it makes it a lot harder to even break that mindset where you would want to go out and talk about it.
Mm-hmm. And Jack, I'm interested because obviously you've had more of a journey in terms of your identity. As somebody who's, become comfortable as a man, what's your take on that particular gender stereotype, stigma, whatever you want to call it, that feeling of needing to project a facade of strength? Is that a pressure that you now feel, or do you think, your journey has kind of brought you in such a way that you've almost, avoided that as such?
In a way, despite, a big part of my life growing up essentially to society anyway as female, I've kind of been one of those people who have always just kind of bottled up my emotions and not shown my emotions because it's been shown to be weak. But I feel as going through my transition with a lot of my friends who don't even know that I'm like trans, I would actually my friends, like my male friends who are good friends to me, and a lot of them have turned around to me and like, I don't know why, but I just feel so comfortable speaking to you about like how I feel, and like trying to like promote that in like the right way and just try and like break down toxic masculinity is so important to me. Even though for example, someone actually said to me, I can't remember what the context was, but someone said to me the other day, man up, and I was just thinking that is such a toxic thing to say to someone, even if it's a joke, because I feel like there is that sort of background to it where it is seen as something that men need to be something that they're not, and they need to have this sort of masculinity, and they're supposed to be strong and they can't cry. But I do feel in a way that I kind of now transitioning into male, that this is something I need to be strong for other people, or for for family as well. But I'm trying to take myself away from that and masculinity, and sort of try and float and be comfortable between being feminine and masculine.
Mm-hmm. And Megan, Shauna said something very interesting, and I thought it was very honest, which was how she had felt. She feels as if she's almost been conditioned as a woman to expect men not to display their emotions. She called it an unconscious bias, is what she called it in the film. Is that something that you can sympathize with? Do you ever have those kind of feelings and need to correct yourself?
No, not personally, but I understand where she is coming from. I come from a family of mostly men, and I got to witness a really nice progression of them going between, berating each other for not being masculine enough, or, discrediting each other's masculinity, to encouraging each other to talk, and, being proud of each other whenever they do whenever they express themselves in the way that they want to. From like, I have an older brother, and my mum raised us both the exact same, you know, to be tough and resilient, but if you need to come home and cry, you can, you know, and we were raised the exact same, which I thought was really, you know, really progressive of her.
Folks, we're running out of time, and I want to just have a short conversation here at the very end where we look to the future and say, you know, where is Northern Ireland going from here? And what I'll give you a heads up in just a second. I'm going to ask you all to tell me something that you love about Northern Ireland and something that you change about Northern Ireland. Okay, so you can be thinking that over as I ask another question, which is that in Northern Ireland, there's a very big problem called the brain drain, where fantastic young people like you maybe go off to university in England or whatever and never come back, or leave Northern Ireland for work. And I want to just get an idea, you know, Finn and Jack, why do you think so many people leave Northern Ireland? And Jack, will you be coming back once you go to London? Finn, why don't we start with you? Why are people leaving, and how can we make sure that people like Jack come back here?
It's kind of hard to say why people, you know, never come back. You know, like both my parents have lived in England for a while and I come back just to do whatever. But there's definitely just a lack of opportunity in Northern Ireland for a lot of things. Like I'm training to become a teacher. So like I want to just be the sort of person who advocates, you know, growth in teenagers and stuff, and like let them know that there's opportunity here, and just let them see that they can follow what they want to do. I want to be an art teacher, so I'm just like, you know, I want them to follow their passion in art and kind of nurture that and show them that art's not just all about drawing or painting or whatever. Like a lot of art teachers do. Like there's so many different avenues to do it, and you know, you could be skilled in one set but not in another. So I just want to have that sort of breed that mentality, like just do what you want to do, and you don't have to do it here, but you can do it here if you want to as well.
Opportunities then is key. And Jack, will you come back once you head over to London?
You know, as Finn said, there are opportunities, a big massive one. I think going in as someone who's going into the health services, we do not get paid enough money over here. Like you go across the water and you get more money as well. And I think that's one of the reasons why, you know, a lot of people, like for example, nurses and stuff, not getting paid enough. I don't know if I'll come back or not. I think, you know, I don't have any plans on coming back for a while. It maybe later on in life, like when I'm a bit older, but not so much at the moment. I feel like I was sucked into the lifestyle there, so I don't know.
I hope you do, Jack. Let's Megan, I'm going to throw you in the deep end because you're going to go first for one thing you love and one thing you changed about Northern Ireland. We've got less than a minute or so let's speed through this. Megan, one thing you love.
I love how dark our sense of humor is. We all have a really dark sense of humor. I think it's brilliant. One thing I don't like is our inability to move forward.
Okay, that's a strong start. Robbie, why don't you go next? One thing you love, one thing you change.
I'd agree with Megan, the dark humor.
No, you can't. You have to come up with a new one, Robbie.
Shame. Okay. I would probably say it's like the start. We're all a part of the beginning of a turning point. I mean, over the past 10 years or so, the way Northern Ireland has been now, it's starting a shift. You know, the LGBTQ came into it, gay marriage or has been passed, along with abortion. So we're kind of like in a pivotal point for everything changing, and we're going to be a part of that, and we can help push it a lot further when.
Okay, super. And one thing you change, Robbie?
Oh, there's a lot. The political structure would be the main one, I'd say.
Okay, solid. Finn, let's speed on through one thing you love, one thing you change. It doesn't need to be too serious, by the way, guys, as well.
Northern Ireland's scenery, absolutely beautiful. You know, I love the treks. I love going to the beach stuff. Fantastic. One thing I change is, I would get that funding that was supposed to be promised for the health service back into the mental health service.
Okay, great answer. Jack, finishes up.
I just love our crack, honestly. Like, I love our culture. No one else gets it. This is what I'm going to miss so much about going to England, saying stupid things that no one understands apart from people in Northern Ireland understand. Do you know what I mean? like Smith culture. But like one of the things I would change would be kind of the same, you know, the funding services and what we can put money into that's important for Northern Ireland to help us in general, just with health services as well.
Super. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, all of you. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Thank you to everyone who watched this session. It's been a real pleasure to be involved. And I think I've certainly learned a lot about young people in Northern Ireland and where we're heading. Probably got a bit of a glimpse into the future of what, as well, an idea of what this place might look like in 10, 20 years from now. I want to thank all the panelists. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Finn. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you so much to everyone at LUMI and the QFT for producing a fantastic docu-series. Thanks to the Community Relations Council for funding its production, and you can find it all online as well if you want to watch back. Thank you to Andrew and the amazing team here who have set up this conference, which I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into as well. But most of all, thanks to everyone who watched this today. Have a great day, enjoy the rest of the conference, and we'll see you soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.